and she is going to talk to you, as I say, about talking to children in relation to a cancer diagnosis. Over to you, Lisa.
Oh, thank you so much, and it's lovely to be here. And I think for me, it's just wonderful to hear that this is recognised as something that is really important. I'm going to share my screen shortly with slides, which I'm going to go through. But as we've said previously, if you have questions, then please do come on board and drop messages into the chat box, or raise your hand if that feels more comfortable. So I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully we can see, and I'm going to rely on my team here to tell me that they can see my slides.
Yes, we can see them.
Yep. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Ray. Yes, I'm centre head at Maggie's, but I have a clinical background. So I was a consultant radiographer in gynae oncology for 26 years before I came to Maggie's. But interestingly, I think, and I'll put my first slide up, one of the things that I wanted to share with you is a little bit of background as to where my interest lies in this area. And at the moment, we're having around 1,000 visitors a month through our doors. And when I started at Maggie's around 10 years ago, one of the underlying themes that I heard was people would come through, they just had their cancer diagnosis, their oncologists, their cancer nurse specialists had signposted them to us. And one of their biggest concerns was, I've just had my diagnosis, how on earth do I go home and talk and tell my children? And that would range from parents who had children that were 5 years old to parents that had children that were 25 years old. So a massive range, but it was clearly an underlying theme that we were seeing on a very regular basis. So I think when we start to unpick some of that, clearly it's a huge package alongside a cancer diagnosis, and there are so many other issues, but clearly for an individual, just having that close relationship with their children, how on earth do I do this? So one of the things I want to do this evening is just to think about some of the evidence around how is best to talk to children, what toolkits can we think about. And I've alluded to the fact, we're talking to children that are 5 years old or 25 years old. So clearly the language within that range is huge. So not one size fits all. We really need to be able to adapt to the needs of the individual. And then I'm going to think about what resources are out there and how we can share those resources with you. I think one of the big things across all of the cancer support that we offer at Maggie's is that breaking down the barriers and not feeling so alone. So often, if we see very young parents that come in with young children, the fear and the uncertainty around a cancer diagnosis with young children is, no one else is experiencing this. My child's going to school and all of their parents are fine. They're not going through treatment. They're not having side effects from treatment. And so to be able to bring those parents together and to share that experience is incredibly powerful. So again, as we've alluded to, do ask questions in the chat as we go through. So, okay, how do we do it? How do we talk to children? And I've put here, we should tell children as soon as you are ready. That's an interesting thought, because I have worked with parents who have potentially got to a point of having chemotherapy and have not spoken about surgery diagnosis prior to that. So then there's a lot of unpicking. But what I always say is talk to the children about what they understand. If mum or dad has been in hospital having investigations, children are so perceptive. And it may be that they have this fear that there's something, you know, awful going on, but they've not had the opportunity to actually discuss the reality. So I think, you know, just asking what they understand, what are they aware of, what are their thoughts, what are their fears, almost before you even then start to talk about a diagnosis. But we know with children, the bite-sized information is really helpful. So just very small bits at a time where it feels appropriate. And I love the analogy of the jigsaw. We can start to build that picture, but just by giving small amounts of information, and as we deliver that information, allowing an openness for questions. So it's always about, this is what I'm telling you, this is the information I'm giving to you. How does that land? What do you hear by that? What questions do you have around that? So I think that the jigsaw picture for me is something that can be quite powerful. I think sometimes it can be quite worrying about what language are you going to use, you know, what words do you use? And I think just having the opportunity to practice some of those conversations can be helpful. And I know in the past when I've worked with families, there's been that fear about, I may get really emotional, I may get upset, and what does that demonstrate to my children? And I think our next slide, I talk a little bit about emotion, but it's okay to have someone with you if you've got a very close friend or a family member that's able to be present and just to facilitate some of those conversations. That could be really valuable. I've put here talk about the facts. Children very much live in the minute. They're very mindful. They're very, okay, what's happening now? Mom or dad, they look fine. You know, they're here, they're well. Okay, you may have mentioned they're having treatment. But children very much respond to having clear facts. And I think, again, just thinking about the environment and who's around. If there are several children in the family, do you talk to the children together, or is the age range so differential that it might be better having conversations separately? So sort of planning all of that, the timing and the environment. And a lot of the evidence suggests that if you're able to have these really difficult conversations almost outside of the environment, so if you're maybe going for a walk, and so there's a focus on everything around you rather than just the focus of sitting in the kitchen over the dining table, and it's very intense, it can just sort of break down some of those barriers and some of the challenges around those conversations. I've put here about using the word cancer. Again, I've worked with lots of families where when we've explored about their sort of interaction with children is very much around, we've spoken about a lump, we've spoken about a tumour, but maybe not talking about cancer. And again, this is very definitely age related. I think in very young children under the age of probably 6, maybe using other terminology is fine. But what we don't want is some for children who are potentially at school and they understand mum or dad has a lump, and then they have perhaps feedback from children who talk about, well, maybe mum or dad has cancer, and all of those associations and misconceptions. So to actually name it and talk about it, because what that then opens up is a discussion about, what do you understand about cancer? And I absolutely know that with some of our older generations, cancer was never spoken about. It was a taboo subject. But now things are very, very different. You know, we have amazing treatments. The success rate of all of the immunotherapies, the targeted treatments are so amazing. But as an adult, we need to share that with our younger population, and they may not be getting that if they're talking amongst their peers at school. So I think actually saying that word is really important. And I think just checking in with children, and it's interesting that I've put this up there, but even when I work with adults within Maggie's and we're talking about strategies and ways of managing a diagnosis and how you navigate that, I will always check in and just try to understand what they've heard, because when the mind is busy and the brain is in that flight mode, which is where we go to when we're given difficult news, we perhaps don't hear things as we're trying to explain them. So I think just checking in with children, you know, what have you heard? What do you understand? What does this mean for you? Just opens up that opportunity for them to share their experience with you. So I've put here a little bit just about some of the things that we can put in place, and I think as a parent myself, as a mom to 2 children, I think one of the things we always try to do is protect our children and our loved ones. We want to ensure that they don't feel pain, they don't feel emotion, that they feel secure in the world. But I think emotion is so valuable, because, as I said on the first slide, children are perceptive. If they're picking up something is not right, something is challenging within the family, but there's no emotion shown with the adults, then children will just try and bury that emotion because it doesn't feel appropriate to open up those conversations. So I think showing that emotion is acceptable, it's okay, it can be managed, and we'll go on to talk about resources, but to know that as a parent you're not alone with that emotion and that you can get support as can the children or teenagers. So I think just producing security, and I think some of that comes around having a very open and honest conversation, and I've put there around honesty. So on getting a diagnosis, it's around, you know, these are the plans, this is my treatment, and if anything changes, we'll talk to you about it. We'll tell you what the doctors are telling us, so that children feel confident that they're very much kept in the loop. I think always be prepared for those difficult questions. And I know recently we had a young family. There was a 5, a 7, and an 11-year-old, and it was actually the 9-year-old that, when the conversation around a diagnosis was discussed, the first words were, "Mummy, are you going to die?" And that's a huge question to have to answer, particularly when you're feeling vulnerable in talking to children. So again, it's about that very honest approach. You know, actually at the moment, the treatment is, you know, it's this and this, and if things change, then we can talk about that, and I will keep you fully informed. And I've put there, explain that things may change. So again, it's just alluding to that that openness and keeping children involved in that loop, and just ensuring they feel that they can ask questions. And I think even after every conversation, maybe inviting a space, you know, is there anything you want to talk about? Is there any thoughts you have? And also maybe identifying somebody else around the family that may be able to answer those questions if they don't feel they can talk to you directly. So that may be a teacher, and I always encourage parents to talk to the school, so they're aware and they can look at the pastoral support that's available for them. I've just put a little bit here about age-appropriate understanding, and this never ceases to amaze me, but this is the research and the evidence base that's around there. And we know if children are between 3 to 5 years, the basic level of understanding is very much around, you know, it's an illness. There is always that underlying, even between 3 and 5, is it something that I've done as a child that's caused this cancer? So I think just ensuring that they know it's not contagious, it's nothing that's been done, it's just something that happens that is very unpredictable. So when we go into the older years, so 6 to 11 years, again, they're starting to understand a little bit more about serious illness and the impacts that might have on potential longevity and security of having people around them. But also we can start to talk a little bit more about good cells, bad cells, and how those cells impact on how our body can function normally. And then, and again, I'm quoting the evidence base here, that at 12 plus, a similar understanding to adults. I have a question mark over that. I'm obviously quoting what's out there, but I would also argue that at 12 years old, they don't have experience of life in general, and pre-teenage years or just heading into teenage years, there's so much going on for them as regards change in their own body, let alone a change that may happen within their families. So I think it's just being aware that, yeah, we may need to use more adult language with a 12-year-old or a teenager, but also that emotionally they're still very, very vulnerable to what might be going on. I've just put up one analogy. There are lots out there, but I think, you know, for some, having visuals or having a way of describing what cancer may mean, and I think this one is quite associable in the fact that, you know, within the beautiful flower beds, we may well have weeds that grow up, which are not necessarily what we want, and they may impact on how those beautiful flowers grow. And therefore, the doctors are able, like very able gardeners, will come in and they'll take those weeds out, and it may mean that they need to use chemicals or ways in which to deplete those weeds, but that enables then the flowers to grow and flourish. I've put up this slide around talking about secondary cancer or metastatic cancer. And again, we can think about the fact that we can see the weeds that are on top, we can deal with those, we remove them, but in some cases there may be the roots that remain below, and at some point in the future they may re-emerge. And with treatments as they are at the moment, we can manage those roots for a long period of time. And so whilst they may crop up in different areas within the garden, there are certainly things that we can do to just try and keep them at bay. They won't ever go away, but we can try and manage them for as long as possible. So I'm aware of time. I'm just going to share this video with you. So it was a video that was made of a family that was supported with the Maggies, and it is around bereavement, but how we supported a family from a point of diagnosis through bereavement. And I'll talk about resources very briefly after it, but I would just like to share this with you. So hopefully
It's not playing, Lisa.
oh, it's not playing.
No.
Daddy had a pretty period.
We've got sound but no images.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Let me just, I'm just going to end my videos and just see whether that will enable it to show. Is that visible? No.
I'm afraid we probably need to move on, because it's
just
almost
while
coming.
it's playing, I'm just going to see if I can.
Daddy had a prickly beard, and what do you used to do with it?
Yeah, we can hear the sound but not see the pictures, please. Oh, there we are.
You're not ticklish.
Is that, can you see that?
Yeah.
The
Okay.
news just came totally out of the blue. We had no thought that it could possibly be cancer, because you just don't think it. We were thrown. We didn't really know what to do, and how to be. Somebody pointed us in the direction of Maggie's, and one afternoon when Sam was sleeping, I went across to the Maggie Centre just to find out what it was about, what Maggie's was, what help they could offer us, and met with one of the cancer care specialists. They were very sympathetic and very helpful as I fell apart on them. Sam went and met with the psychologist. For him, that was really helpful to have that one-to-one space. I think the art therapy was brilliant because it allowed me the space to talk about how I was feeling, but also the things I was worrying about. There were times when I would feel like I was trying to juggle all these different things of looking after Sam, but looking after the kids. I was maybe worried about how the kids were reacting, or feeling like I just couldn't manage with life. After Sam died, it was really hard for me to know how best to help them. The children's bereavement art therapy group is really, really important for the kids. They love going and doing the crafts, talking about memories of their dad, or talking about different aspects of what they're going through has been really helpful.
They sit in a group with children that are in a really similar situation to them. It's a space where they can bring what they want to, but it's not forced.
This makes me feel better about Daddy. Makes me feel a bit happy, a bit sad, and a bit funny.
The thing that Sam found the hardest all the way through was knowing that he wasn't going to be around to watch the children grow up and to grow old with me. Sam brought so much joy and fun and silliness into our life, and it would be very easy to have lost all of that. we hadn't had Maggie's, it's hard to know how we would have coped as a family, from being able to answer questions about things that we didn't understand after oncology appointments, through to the art therapy groups and the bereavement support we're getting now. It's very hard to imagine that we would be in the robust place we are now had we not had that support from Maggie's all the way through. It has been incredibly important for us as a family.
Right, I'll just stop sharing there. Okay, so can you now see my screen with my slides?
No, we can't see the slides.
You can't see the slides. Okay, let me just, you can tell
We
I'm
can
not.
share them afterwards though, Lisa, that's
Yeah,
fine.
just
And
thinking about that, I think we just need to hand over, Lisa. Like,
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. So I've got lots of resources that I'll share with you. So I'd like obviously to hand over to someone who has experience. So just to welcome you and thank you for being here this evening.
It's me, right, Lisa?
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Happy to.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anubha Sharma. I live in Norwich. As you may know or you may not know, just 2 years ago in January 2022, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I remember it was exact January 10th. My son was at that time 19 years old. He was not small, but he was not mature enough as well. He was just in teenager, and it was his first year in uni. He went to uni in September. My test and scan started from November. And he came back for December, Christmas and New Year in December, and he went back to uni on January 5th. And just after 5 days, I was diagnosed with cancer. And because we are so close, and I and my son, we are absolutely friends, more than mom and son. And I was absolutely in denial, thinking that I'm not going to disclose my cancer diagnosis on the phone or on in the screen, because he's staying there all alone at uni accommodation. So I will keep that. I'll hold this news with him. So it was a white lie. I accept this, and I'm proud that I did this. And I decided that until he comes back for his Easter holidays in March end, I'm not going to tell him, because he has to live his normal life. And because I'm always, smiling, very active. We play together. That's how I am, and that's what he has seen on me. And I was like this because thankfully my cancer diagnosis was stage 1 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It did not affect me health-wise at all. I was working absolutely as normal, but I was told my treatment is going to start from February 15th, my first chemotherapy treatment. My hair was longer. I had to cut it short so that it will have a lower effect. And because I and my son, we used to, my husband, we as a family, we always talk on a once a week. And my son, he saw me, my hair was really short, from a longer hair to short, which he has never seen it before. And he asked me, what have you done with your hair? And I said that I wanted my new look. And that's all I said. I said white lie, and I admit that. And it was going on, and I had my first chemo in February, but thankfully my first chemo didn't take my hair at all. And second chemo was on March 9th. By the time he came back, I still had quite a lot of hair where he couldn't identify that if there was something wrong going on with me. He came back for Easter holidays. I and my husband, it was absolutely normal. Friday night, he always comes in Friday night, and we sat down together, had a lovely dinner, because I wanted absolutely normal as possible. And because it is so important how you tell your children. Exactly, Lisa, how you laid your story. This is exactly I'm going to tell, and that's how I felt as well. The tone and the environment, how you lay out, what the positivity you put that with your children, that makes all difference. Once we finished our dinner, we sat in the lounge. He was in one city, and I and my husband, we sat together. And it was my husband that he started talking about this, saying that we have got something we need to discuss with you. And because we are always jolly and we always a happy person, I mean, he may have noticed that we are a bit serious at that time, and he was just looking at our face. And the husband, he said that we have to talk about your mom. Recently, there are a couple of tests and scans were going on when you were at uni, and just recently she was diagnosed with cancer. By that time, I already had 2 chemos. He didn't have any clue at all. But even after 2 chemos and things, I was absolute normal health-wise. As soon as my husband said about cancer ward, and I said, okay, yes, now this is my turn because this is my cancer. I want to talk about this with my son in my way. And I absolutely, with a smiley face, cancer, what it is, what it is implication would be, or prognosis what it is, because it is stage 1 and the treatment plan is 6 months, and I'm absolutely over the moon that after 6 months I will have my normal life back. And I talked about in detail about what non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is, because he's at the right age to know about it, and he knows because he's a science student, right? What non-Hodgkin's, what stages, and what a life after my treatment would be. I laid out perfectly in a way and said that I'm so much looking forward to, and look at me, how I am taking this. You have to see me before you think about or before you Google it. Just look at me and move on in our life. This is what exactly I have done. And that word and that presentation has defined everything about him. And Lisa, you are absolutely right that, and this is what my point was, and I'm so happy you mentioned that in your first presentation, you have to tailor your tone, your presentation, and how you tell you. It's all about, you need to tailor your approach as per their age. And I also say that even though my son was 19 years old and he had that confidence, comfort from me, seeing at me and how I presented, but they are children, they get emotional. And even though he doesn't show me because he's 19 years old, he's not matured enough, but he's not child anymore as well. So he may not tell me that how he has been through after hearing this. And because he's a really social person, and he has got a lot of good friends, and they are really close to me as well. I mean, we are almost kind of a friends with 10 12 boys. And I can't believe that just 2 days after his 4 or 5 close friends, they came to our home, and they straight came to the kitchen and said, how are you? And I was really surprised that my son, within 2 or 3 days, he went back to his friends. He shared my news with them, and all their friends hugged him, saying that your mom is going to be okay because she will be fine. She's such a strong lady. From this point, what I have learned and what I would like to tell is, no matter what, they have got that emotional part, and you need to take that on board and deal with in a same way. But also I would like to say is, there are very small children, and there are younger teenagers, and there are a bit matured enough child like mine. I think it would be harder to deal with very grown-up teenagers and matured one than smaller children, because I think the smaller children, they will not, even though they will have that, yes, we have to talk about cancer and things, they will not be, I mean, they are not so much grown up. They perceive that as so much negativity at that time if you support them in a right way at that time. But if you have got grown up teenagers or 19, 20 years older, but if they didn't get right support, they can be so much vulnerable. That's why we have to think about anyone who is 11 years or over, then we have to deal with it very, very carefully than anyone who is 5 or 6 years old. That's what I say. And right environment, right tone, and positivity and motivation. But equally now, I have just been made after 2 years of my treatment, I have been made declared cancer free just a couple of days ago. And in my every 3 months routine visit, what doctor said, I share everything with my son, that what doctor said to me and how it will be. And now after 2 years, because once that is gone, is openness. The more
Thank
you
you.
talk, the more talk about it, they feel more comfortable, and the comfortness they will get. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much, Anuba, for sharing your story.
But
Ali, would
thank you
stop
so
the
much. Yeah, thank
recording
you.
now.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jane.
We are now terminating the recording. So if you want to put your cameras